Welcome to this explainer. At the close of the American Civil War, the United States was facing an absolutely unprecedented reality. We're talking about a nation literally torn apart, devastated communities, and a totally new social order having to take root right out of the ashes. Rebuilding a broken nation from the ground up, well, it wasn't just a matter of bricks and mortar. It was really about figuring out exactly what it meant to be a citizen in a newly forged society. Today, we're diving straight into this monumental task of reconstruction and the moral foundation that the source material argues made the whole thing possible. To really wrap our heads around this massive recovery, the source material actually anchors its philosophy in a biblical principle, specifically Philippians 2:4, which says, "Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." Think about it. After a brutally exhausting war, mere survival might tempt anyone to just look out for number one, right? But true reconstruction, that demands a mindset where individuals actively care about the person standing right next to them. This is framed as the absolute ultimate foundation of civic duty. Here's our agenda for today's explainer. 1. Rebuilding a broken nation. 2. The big idea of citizenship. 3. Insight 1. The vote. 4. Insight 2. Public service. 5. Insight 3. Community leadership. And finally, 6. Why education needs morality. Section 1. Rebuilding a broken nation, the post-war challenge. Even though the guns had finally fallen silent, the absolute hardest work was really just getting started. Fixing the country took immense, active effort from everyday citizens, and they did this amidst some really fierce opposition and deep-seated prejudices. They didn't just sit around waiting for someone else to swoop in and fix things. Nope, they got to work. They drafted entirely new state constitutions to actually reflect this new era of freedom. They boldly joined local governments, which, by the way, was often at great personal risk. And they heavily supported public education, recognizing that a truly functioning society totally depends on an educated public. They were literally laying the groundwork for stronger communities with their own two hands. Moving on to Section 2. The big idea of citizenship, more than just a status. So the source highlights a really distinct difference here. It contrasts citizenship as a passive legal status, essentially just a piece of paper or a label granted by a government, with citizenship as an active, ongoing responsibility. It's a real game changer. For democracy to actually work, especially for newly freed African Americans at the time, citizenship couldn't just be a passive title. It had to be a responsibility they actively lived out every single day. Section 3. Insight 1. The vote. A voice in the laws. So here's a question for you. Why was the right to vote the most vital, absolutely crucial first step for newly freed African Americans? Well, the answer is that voting gave freedmen a direct voice in making the very laws that affected their daily lives. It definitely wasn't just some symbolic gesture of freedom. It was the actual mechanism for securing their future. By stepping up and casting a ballot, they were directly shaping the rules of their society. They were ensuring that the laws governing them finally actually reflected their needs and their humanity. That brings us to Section 4, Insight 2, Public Service, Serving the Community. This leads us to another great question. How exactly did African Americans serve their communities beyond just the ballot box? How did they take that next big step into active leadership? They expanded their influence by taking on some immense public service roles. Yes, they registered to vote in massive numbers, absolutely, but they also ran for public office. In fact, during Reconstruction, over 1,500 African American men held public office. To put that into perspective, that is a staggering, monumental shift from the era of enslavement just a few years prior. On top of all that, they served on juries, and that meant they finally had a direct hand in the justice system. By holding office and taking on jury duty, they became absolutely essential to passing fairer laws and ensuring fair trials. So, thinking about all this, what is one way everyday citizens can actually influence laws? Well, based on the history we're looking at, stepping into public service, like running for local office or serving on a jury, is a direct, powerful path to shaping fair legislation. Just wishing for fair laws isn't going to cut it, right? Citizens actually have to be part of the system that creates and upholds them. Moving right along to Section 5, Insight 3, Community Leadership, Improving Daily Life. We know the government can only reach so far, right? So how did these newly empowered leaders actually improve the day-to-day conditions for their neighbors and their families? They dove headfirst into massive grassroots leadership. Citizens started organizing schools with incredible speed just to ensure the next generation got an education. They built churches, which rapidly became the spiritual, social, and political hubs of community life. They also created vital aid programs to help those who were really struggling to get back on their feet. And they became the essential pillars of their towns, stepping up as teachers, ministers, and business owners. They were literally shaping their communities from the ground up. So why is this kind of community leadership so incredibly important? Honestly, it's the absolute backbone of a thriving society. Without everyday leaders doing the hard, daily work of educating, feeding, and guiding their neighborhoods, the broader political goals of Reconstruction would have never, ever survived. It's those community leaders who actually take abstract laws and rights and turn them into real, lived realities for people. Which brings us to our final section, number 6, Why Education Needs Morality, the HeroesMart Academy Philosophy. To sum up its philosophy, the HeroesMart Academy curriculum contrasts two distinct paths here. It argues that education without a moral compass can actually lead to poor choices that end up hurting individuals and the people around them. On the flip side, education that's intertwined with biblical principles, like, say, looking out for the interests of others, shapes citizens who actively use their knowledge to build up their communities rather than tear them down. To back this up, the curriculum points directly to Romans 8:6-7, which promises peace of mind to everyone who keeps their mind spiritual. In this specific framework, combining education with a spiritual foundation is viewed as the real key to lasting peace. It's all about aligning your intellect with a broader sense of civic duty and a genuine care for others. So I'll leave you with this final thought. How will you use your own education and moral compass to serve your community? The history we've explored today shows us that rebuilding a nation relies heavily, and I mean heavily, on individuals choosing to actively participate and care for others. Thank you so much for joining in for this explainer on the HeroesMart perspective of Reconstruction. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.